You're not really gonna write me up, are you, Chief?
Yeah, I'm really gonna write you up.
I was just running some red lights,
Uh-huh.
Chief. Ain't nobody up this time except you. Now, what's the harm in there?
Imagine walking into a town where your identity alone turns every lawman nervous, not because you're guilty, but because you can't be controlled. In the Heat of the Night isn't just about racism, it's about what happens when authority meets a man who refuses to disappear. Fact 1. Virgil Tibbs' identity is dangerous before he speaks. Before Tibbs says a single word, the town has already decided who he is. Not a detective, not a professional, not an equal, just a problem. The film shows that identity itself can be perceived as disruption, especially when it doesn't match the roles power expects. Tibbs doesn't threaten authority by acting out, he threatens it simply by existing confidently. Fact 2. Authority in the film depends on people knowing their place. The town's power structure is stable because everyone knows who gives orders, who follows, who stays silent. Tibbs breaks this unspoken rule. He speaks directly, challenges assumptions, refuses deference. The film suggests that authority often collapses not when it's attacked, but when it's ignored. Fact 3. Moral isolation is used to control Tibbs. Rather than openly removing Tibbs, the town isolates him. He is surrounded but not supported, present but excluded, necessary but unwelcome. This isolation isn't accidental, it's strategic. The film reveals how power punishes outsiders, not through violence first, but through loneliness. Fact 4. Tibbs' intelligence separates him from everyone else. Tibbs doesn't share the town's assumptions, its prejudices, its emotional comfort. His intelligence creates distance, not superiority, separation. The film suggests that being right in the wrong place can be more isolating than being wrong among allies. Truth without belonging becomes a burden. Fact 5. The film treats identity as something authority cannot rewrite. The town tries to redefine Tibbs as suspect, as subordinate, as temporary, but Tibbs never accepts these definitions. The film makes a powerful claim. Authority can assign roles, but it cannot erase identity unless the person cooperates. Refusal becomes resistance. Fact 6. Authority feels threatened because Tibbs cannot be intimidated. Most people in the town respond to authority with fear, deference, silence. Tibbs does none of these. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't beg. He doesn't flinch. The film shows that authority relies heavily on emotional compliance. When intimidation fails, authority begins to fracture. Fact 7. Moral isolation is used to test Tibbs' endurance. Tibbs is not attacked immediately. Instead, he is tested, ignored, left alone, excluded from informal support. The film presents isolation as a trial. If Tibbs withdraws, authority wins. If he adapts, authority tightens pressure. Isolation becomes a way to see how much dignity someone is willing to lose to belong. Fact 8. Silence becomes a measure of power. In many scenes, Tibbs speaks, and no one responds. This silence isn't ignorance, it's resistance. By refusing to engage, authority attempts to deny legitimacy, withhold acknowledgement, control narrative. The film shows that silence can function as a declaration. You exist, but we don't have to recognize you. Fact 9. Authority begins to copy Tibbs without admitting it. As the investigation progresses, something subtle happens. Sheriff Gillespie starts following Tibbs' logic, uses his methods, adopts his conclusions, but he rarely credits him openly. The film highlights a painful truth. Systems often adopt outsider ideas while denying outsiders recognition. Power prefers plagiarism over partnership. Fact 10. Tibbs is forced to choose between safety and integrity. At multiple moments, Tibbs could back down, soften his tone, avoid confrontation. Doing so would make his life easier, but the film makes his dilemma clear. Safety requires surrendering integrity. Integrity requires accepting isolation. Tibbs chooses isolation and pays for it emotionally. Fact 11. Moral isolation escalates into physical vulnerability. Earlier, Tibbs is isolated socially. Now he is exposed physically. No backup, no protection, no guarantee anyone will intervene. The film shows a grim progression. When authority can't silence truth socially, it allows danger to handle the rest. Isolation becomes permission. Fact 12. Tibbs is blamed for the tension he reveals. As conflict escalates, Tibbs is subtly reframed as the problem. Not the crime, not the lies, not the prejudice, but him. The film exposes a classic power move. Truth-tellers are blamed not for being wrong, but for making people uncomfortable. Disruption becomes guilt. Fact 13. Authority protects itself by letting threats linger. The danger Tibbs faces is not always direct. It's allowed. Slow response, minimal concern, plausible deniability. The film reveals how authority can maintain innocence while still enabling harm. Neglect becomes a weapon that leaves no fingerprints. Fact 14. Sheriff Gillespie's authority is tested by his willingness to act. At this stage, Sheriff Gillespie faces a quiet crossroads. He can maintain distance and preserve order, or intervene and risk losing face. The film shows that authority is not defined by position, but by the moments when power chooses to act or not. Neutrality here becomes a decision, not an absence. Fact 15. Tibbs' identity hardens under pressure. Isolation doesn't break Tibbs, it sharpens him. He becomes more precise, less conciliatory, emotionally guarded. The film suggests that prolonged moral isolation doesn't always destroy identity. Sometimes it solidifies it. But the cost is heavy. Strength replaces connection. Fact 16. Authority accepts Tibbs only when isolation fails. Authority doesn't welcome Tibbs because it grows morally. It accepts him because isolation stops working. The film shows a cold reality. Power often changes not from reflection, but from exhaustion. When exclusion no longer silences truth, authority adapts to survive. Fact 17. Gillespie's shift is pragmatic, not transformational. Sheriff Gillespie does not become enlightened. He becomes practical. He realizes Tibbs is indispensable. Evidence matters. Order cannot be maintained without truth. The film refuses the fantasy of instant moral awakening. Change arrives through necessity, not redemption. Fact 18. Moral isolation leaves permanent distance. Even after the case is solved, Tibbs remains separate. There is no celebration, no social reintegration, no invitation to belong. The film emphasizes a painful truth. Isolation can end functionally, but remain emotionally. Justice doesn't erase what exclusion carved into identity. Fact 19. Respect is finally granted without friendship. The final interaction between Tibbs and Gillespie is restrained. No warmth, no bonding, just acknowledgement. The film suggests something powerful. Respect doesn't require affection. Recognition doesn't require comfort. Sometimes dignity is simply being seen clearly, nothing more. Fact 20. The film argues that authority is legitimate only when it listens. At its core, In the Heat of the Night isn't about crime. It's about legitimacy. Authority that refuses challenge, silences competence, isolates truth, eventually collapses under its own blindness. The film's final message is sharp. Authority earns legitimacy not through power, but through its willingness to listen. In the Heat of the Night ends quietly. Not with reconciliation, not with unity, but with something rarer, recognition without illusion. It reminds us that being right can be lonely, but it's the loneliness that keeps truth intact. If you appreciate films that explore identity under pressure, authority challenged by truth, and the cost of standing alone when silence is safer, subscribe now. This channel doesn't just retell movies, it dissects the power structures inside them and why those stories still matter today.